Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 19, Bombay to London, 1946. The door to Puma Swaraj has been at last opened. Mahatma Gandhi told his prayer meeting at Birla House in New Delhi on 2nd September 1946 as their uncrowned king Jawaharlal and his colleagues took oaths of office in that flower-decked capital. Nehru was now virtually the Prime Minister of India, and he placed Patel in charge of Home Affairs, Police, and Baldev Singh in charge of Defence or War. A new government came into being in this ancient land. Nehru broadcast from New Delhi a few days later, the interim or provisional government we called it. India, this old and dear land of ours, is finding herself again through travail and suffering. She is youthful again with the bright eyes of adventure and with faith in herself and her mission. On September 8th, Wavell very urgently transmitted his breakdown plan for India to Pethick Lawrence, estimating that we would not govern the whole of India for more than a year and a half. The Viceroy's plan of withdrawal depended, as he put it, on absolute firmness by HMG, and Wavell requested permission to announce his plan publicly before January 1st. He wanted all Indians to know that the British were ready to pull back their troops from south to north, disembarking from the subcontinent through Karachi and Calcutta, with select elite officials flying out of New Delhi. Approximately 100,000 European civilians and another 100,000 British troops would have to be evacuated from India. Wavell dined with Jinnah's old friend Sarojini Naidu on September 10th, and we had a long talk on politics and of the necessity of getting Jinnah and the Muslim League in, and the difficulties of Jinnah's character. Mrs. Naidu spoke of Jinnah rather as of Lucifer, a fallen angel, one who had once promised to be a great leader of Indian freedom, but who had cast himself out of the Congress heaven. The Daily Mail, whose correspondent in Bombay interviewed Jinnah, reported his remarking, "The wound is too deep and the negotiations have led to too much bitterness and rancor for us to prolong the present arguments. The slate must be wiped clean and we must begin from the beginning again. I shall never plead my case, but were the British government to invite me to London to start a new series of conferences on an equal footing with the other negotiators, I should accept. If the British insist on doing nothing more than support the present interim government with their bayonets, all I can say is that Muslims can endure it. If they want to arrest me, now I am ready to go to prison immediately." With riots in Bombay, Calcutta shouldering, and Nehru running the show in New Delhi, the prospect of a visit to London must have looked quite appealing to Jinnah. Through sultry monsoon haze atop Malabar Hill. Or if not London, why not prison? Rather, one extreme of glory or the other, the limbo of obscure uncertainty, cut off from power, from the glitter of the Viceroy's magic circle, where he had once held center stage, and from the achievement of Pakistan, which hardly anyone mentioned nowadays, except with a shudder or a shrug. The Viceroy met alone with Jinnah on September 16th for 75 minutes, and earlier that same day with Nehru and Patel, both of whom disliked his overtures to Jinnah. Congress leadership by now mistrusted Wavell and advised Pethick Lawrence, Cripps and Attlee to remove him from power, considering the Viceroy too supportive of the Muslim League demands and dangerously limited in background and training to the resolution of military rather than political problems. The cabinet, in the aftermath of its mission's bitter failure, however, was hardly ready to take any radical leap inside India's political jungle. At Nehru's insistence, Wavell agreed provisionally to convene the Constituent Assembly on December 9th, by which time the Viceroy hoped a settlement with the League would be reached. The mission ministers met with Attlee at 10 Downing Street on September 23rd to consider the Viceroy's breakdown plan. The Prime Minister expressed strong objections to Wavell's proposals, which he considered alarmist. Cripps agreed, saying that the moment our withdrawal was announced, everyone in India would start scrambling for position. Civil war would come upon us at once. He favored convening the Constituent Assembly at once, with or without the Muslim League. Pethick Lawrence felt that the Viceroy's proposal would make an administrative breakdown a certainty. Attlee could not understand why Wavell wanted to abandon Madras and Bombay, two of the best places from which to withdraw Europeans, leaving the British troops to hold the most difficult part of India, where an attempt to set up Pakistan would cause civil war. Wavell spent almost 2 hours with Jinnah on September 25th, reporting him very quiet and reasonable and anxious for a settlement if it can be done without the loss of prestige. Jinnah hoped Congress would refrain as a gesture of goodwill from appointing any Muslim and was interested in rotating the vice president's position in the cabinet with Nehru. The next afternoon, Nehru and Gandhi came in tandem, each talking for an hour with the Viceroy and convincing him they do not want Jinnah and the League in, and Gandhi at the end exposed Congress' policy of domination more nakedly than ever before. The more I see of that old man, Wavell admitted, the more I regard him as an unscrupulous old hypocrite. By October 1st, Wavell was convinced that it is no use trying to squeeze the Congress any further on the nationalist Muslim issue. The Viceroy then decided his best tactics would be to induce Jinnah simply to give me 5 names for the Muslim seats. It was in the obvious interest of the Muslim League to come into the government as soon as possible, Wavell now believed. So Wavell met Jinnah next day and spelled out his strategy for bringing the League into the interim government. Mr. Jinnah said nothing at all on the nationalist Muslim issue and did not attempt to argue it, the Viceroy noted. But he said that if he was to have any chance of success with his working committee, he must have some success to show them on the other points he had raised. Wavell explained that the only function of the Vice President was to preside at the cabinet meetings in my absence, and that I could arrange for the leader of the Muslim Party to be appointed as Vice Chairman of the CCC, which was really a more influential position. He understood well how important matters of prestige were to Jinnah's mind and clearly revealed here the unpublicized powers retained by himself as Governor General. By the end of their meeting, he got the impression that Jinnah was anxious to come in. Jinnah, moreover, by then must have been at least equally impressed at how much the Viceroy wanted him as the League's comforting countervailing influence to Nehru, Patel and the others inside the vice-regal council chambers of Delhi and Simla. Whether it was Wavell's ardor in wooing him or Jinnah's current frustrations at having missed the maiden voyage of the interim government that imbued Nehru with so much seeming power and pomp, those October negotiations in New Delhi swiftly accomplished what had eluded the labors of the cabinet mission for 3 months earlier in the year. Perhaps it was the tragic, sobering reality of the great Calcutta killing and the bloody Bombay riots, or his counsel's impatience, or his own deteriorating health that made Jinnah far more flexible in reaching a settlement that was to bring the League into an interim coalition government with Congress in a record-breaking mere 2 weeks of negotiation. Nor did Nehru and Congress court him or pander to his ego. Such negative signals from old adversaries may have served only to convince Jinnah that it was indeed high time for him to scuttle excess baggage and climb aboard while there was still a rope to catch and a ship's master to welcome him so warmly. The Nawab of Bhopal, Jinnah's old friend and Chancellor of the Chamber of Princes since 1944, then entered the act or shoved in a rather intrusive oar, as Wavell put it, inviting Jinnah and Nehru to meet in his palace to discuss their residual differences. I have consulted some of my colleagues about the matter discussed by us yesterday, Nehru wrote Jinnah on October 6th. We all agree that nothing could be happier and better for the country than that these two organizations, Congress and the League, should meet again as before as friends, having no mental reservations and bent on resolving their differences by mutual consultation and never desiring or allowing the intervention of the British government through the Viceroy or some other. We would therefore welcome the decision of the League to join the interim government for it to work as a united team on behalf of India as a whole. Nehru then noted a number of problems and concerns he had with various points put forward by Jinnah in their conversation. Jinnah responded next day, I appreciate and reciprocate your sentiments. With regard to the second paragraph, he countered the points noted in Nehru's letter, concluding, I am anxious that we should come to settlement without undue delay. Nehru's response to Jinnah's letter was less cordial, and Wavell reported on October 9th there has evidently been some hitch. 2 days later, the Viceroy wired a secret report he had just received from Bhopal as to what went wrong. Jinnah and Gandhi apparently accepted a formula which spoke of the Muslim League as representing the overwhelming majority of Muslims. Then, at the instance of the Patel group, he, Gandhi, added a rider to the effect that the two parties would agree to work as a team and would never invoke or permit the intervention of the Governor General. Inevitably, the rider was unacceptable to Jinnah. Wavell had earlier been at pains to assure Nehru that he was not calling in Jinnah to push him and the League into a coalition cabinet in order to create a King's party inside the new government. But now he admitted, fearing that Gandhi and the Congress were seeking to secure Muslim League compliance in an arrangement to eliminate the Governor General's influence in the cabinet and reduce him to a figurehead. The Viceroy had what he called a crucial interview with Jinnah the next afternoon when he learned that the League was ready to join the interim government, but that Jinnah was going to pitch a surprise fastball at Congress by proposing a member of the scheduled untouchable caste as one of his 5 Muslim names for the cabinet. I said that it would look rather like tit for tat, Wavell noted, a counter to Congress nomination of a nationalist Muslim and would therefore be rather an embarrassment to me. I gathered that the man they had in mind to nominate was, at present, a minister in Bengal. J. N. Mandal was then Minister of Law in Bengal, an advocate whose greatest attraction to the League appears to have been that he was born untouchable. Jinnah personally decided to remain outside, leaving Liaquat to head his party's team with I. Chundrigar of Bombay, Abdur Rab Nishtar from the frontier, Zanfar Ali Khan of the Punjab to complete the League's interim government slate. Nehru dropped 2 of his Muslims, Shafat Khan and Sayyid Zahir, and Subhas Bose's brother, Sarat Bose, from his cabinet, thus making room for Jinnah's choices. The new coalition was officially announced on October 15th, but as communal rioting spread from Bengal to the northwest frontier, the Congress-League coalition was off to a most precarious start. A major stumbling block was that the League insisted on preempting at least one of the three most powerful cabinet positions, foreign affairs, home or defense, held by Nehru, Patel and Baldev Singh respectively. Congress was unwilling to relinquish any of those jobs. Nehru was also upset about reports of a speech Liaquat made in Karachi on October 20th, when he reportedly said the League had decided to enter the government because Congress in its heart was adverse to the League's entry, and that, as before, Muslims must continue to prepare to fight for the winning of Pakistan. Nehru demanded retraction of both statements and wanted clarification of League's long-range intentions as well as a definite assurance by them that there will be cooperation and teamwork. Wavell feared that Congress resolved to do all they can to prevent the League coming in. Nehru had earlier indicated that Congress was ready to turn over finance, then headed by South India Christian Dr. John Mathai, to the League. A harried Wavell insisted, whatever the outcome, that I must come home at once for consultation. On the evening of October 24th, Nehru confirmed that Congress had decided to resign if Patel's Home Ministry portfolio went to the League. The Viceroy called in Jinnah at 7:30 p.m. to ask if he would accept finance. Jinnah was not in a very accommodating mood, but he agreed, with the usual proviso that it was subject to the decision of his working committee. I then sent for Nehru at 9:30 p.m. and told him that the League would accept finance and asked him to let me know what alternative portfolio he proposed for Mathai. Nehru, who looked very tired and worn, accepted this quietly and said he would let me know after consulting his colleagues. Neither party has the least trust in the other. It is all very wearing, and for almost the first time in my life, I am really beginning to feel the strain badly, not sleeping properly and letting these wretched people worry me. The new members of the government were sworn in October 20th, but there would be no harmony or true spirit of unity in that short-lived central government. Jinnah permitted himself to be persuaded by Wavell to join up only as a tactical stratagem, to buy time for the League to marshal all its forces, gathering strength in this brief period of seeming cooperation with the Congress for the final phase, the last charge up the perilous hill of partition to Pakistan. There was no reconciliation, no solution to the problems of fundamental mistrust, suspicion, fear, and hatred. Too much blood had been let, too many knives buried in too many backs. Too many unborn babies had been butchered in their mothers' wombs. Too many women raped. Too many men robbed. People were fired to irrational hatred by the sick reflections of their communal neighbors in the house or village next door. India's newly elected Legislative Assembly met on October 29th, with Nehru and Liaquat Ali Khan seated side by side on the government's front bench, neither smiling or saying a word to each other all day. They sat the way most Hindu and Muslim Indians lived, in sullen, silent, angry proximity, resenting, fearing, and distrusting one another. Next morning, Nehru took to his bed, exhausted more by depression than overwork, though his daily schedule had been grueling. Jinnah spent over an hour with Wavell on October 30th, and the Viceroy found him at his most Jinnah-ish, completely unsatisfactory. I told Mr. Jinnah that I hoped he would call his council at once to accept the statement of May 16th. Wavell reported since the cabinet mission statement was a condition of the League's acceptance of the office at the centre and had been rejected the previous month by the League's council in Bombay. Wavell flew in to Calcutta on October 31st. Sarath Bose was threatening to call a new strike. Governor Burrows warned the Viceroy that he could not carry Bengal for more than one more year. Nehru and Patel and Liaquat and Nishtar flew to Calcutta early in November to see for themselves how India's premier metropolis was faring. Burrows briefed them on arrival, pointing out the army had been directing traffic in the streets in Calcutta for approximately 10 weeks, while trade was stagnating and workers as well as businessmen were injuriously affected. Bengal, with 33 million Muslims and 25 million Hindus, desperately needed an all party government to help bring tranquility to the province. Yet, no coalition was even being discussed. Nehru and Liaquat could hardly accomplish for Bengal, however, what they found impossible to do among themselves in New Delhi. Governor Sir Hugh Dow of Bihar reported his appreciation of the communal riots in his province on November 9th, by which time 9 battalions of troops had been ordered into the rural regions most seriously affected. Roving Hindu mobs have sought to exterminate the Muslim population wherever they could find them, wrote the governor. Almost all casualties have been Muslims, and it is estimated that these 75% have been women and children. Dawn headlined in mid November interview given by Jinnah to the foreign press on its front page. Absolute Pakistan, the only solution. Reporting, Muslim League President Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah declared that in his view, the only solution to India's present communal situation is Pakistan and Hindustan. Anything else would be artificial and unnatural. Of the interim government, Mr. Jinnah said the Muslim League ministers were there as sentinels who would watch Muslim interest in the day-to-day administration. Asked if he favored abandoning the interim government, Mr. Jinnah replied, "I have said this. It was forced upon us. The present arrangement I don't approve of." Congress insisted and Pethick Lawrence agreed that the Constituent Assembly must be called on December 9th as planned. Official invitations were issued and soon after, on November 21st, Dawn led off with, "The Viceroy seems to think that the play of Hamlet can be staged with only half a Hamlet." He has summoned the Constituent Assembly to meet, although the Muslim League's decision not to participate in it still stands. There are reasons to believe that he has been jockeyed into this decision by Congress pressure. For some days past, all guns have been trained on him. Whatever his gallantry on battlefields might have been, he seems to have put that virtue in cold storage along with his field marshal's uniform. Wavell met with all 4 Muslim League members of the cabinet that afternoon, and Liaquat put to me quite bluntly the question whether I and His Majesty's government intended to keep order in India and to protect the minorities while we remained here or not. He said that the responsibility was still ours, but that we were not carrying it out. I felt bound in honesty to tell them that our ability to carry out our responsibility had very greatly weakened since the British government had announced its intention of handing over power in India shortly. We could not expect the same degree of cooperation and support from the officials and police that we formerly enjoyed. The recent troubles had shown that the police in many parts of India were affected with communalism and were no longer to be relied on for firm action against their own community. Jinnah announced to the press on November 22nd that no representative of the Muslim League will participate in the Constituent Assembly. Wavell sent for Liaquat the next day and argued with him over an hour, trying to persuade his finance member to get his party to attend the assembly. I completely failed to convince him, Wavell wired Pethick Lawrence, as I had previously failed with Jinnah. It was finally clear to Lord Wavell that his last great push, getting the League into government, was only a Pyrrhic victory. Nothing has changed. The Secretary of State invited Wavell to return home at once with 2 representatives of the Congress and 2 from the League to discuss the entire situation and seek a new settlement formula. The Viceroy suggested adding a Sikh, proposing Baldev Singh, his defense member. Nehru consulted colleagues on the working committee and on behalf of Congress turned down the invitation. Baldev also declined a day later. Jinnah, however, was pleased to accept and agreed to fly to London with Liaquat and the Viceroy. Attlee then wired a personal appeal to Nehru, pleading with him to reconsider, to help in this way to make rapid and smooth progress towards the goal of Indian freedom. Congress met again for a full day's discussion, and Nehru and Baldev Singh decided to go to London after all. On the eve of their departure, Jinnah changed his mind after learning that Nehru and Baldev were coming. What an impossible set of people they are, Wavell noted. I sent Ian Scott off to see Liaquat, and by midnight he returned to say that we had got this far, that Liaquat had agreed to come with us to Karachi tomorrow to see Jinnah and try to persuade him to come. The next day, when they flew from Delhi, Liaquat was dressed for Europe. Jinnah received a midnight cable from Attlee, personally pressing him to come, and though rather late, he finally climbed aboard the Viceroy's plane in Karachi. The crowd that had come to see him off at the airport shouted, "Pakistan Zindabad."